Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's open office hour session on how to submit your portfolio. My name is Charlotte Dreisen. I'm a sustainability manager here with AIA National on the 2030 commitment team, and am delighted to see some familiar names, if not faces, with us today for this session. Encourage everyone, if you so choose, to come on video. Feel free at any point to unmute yourself as well during this conversation today, and would really be delighted to have this be a conversation as I walk through a short number of slides and dive into the DDX, the Design Data Exchange, to walk through the platform, the adding project process, and the portfolio submission process as well. And we'll give folks just another minute to join us before we jump on in. For those who are just joining us now, hello again. My name is Charlotte Dreisen with the AIA National 2030 Commitment Team. Really appreciate everyone taking the time today to join us for this open office hour session on how to submit your portfolio. We'll be focusing mostly on direct input today. For those who are bulk uploaders and have specific questions about bulk upload, I will certainly share the link for an open office hour session we did directly on that topic, specifically on that topic, just at the start of our reporting season in December, which goes through the process in depth, but it's a little bit of its own can of worms. So just as a heads up, that's going to be the main focus of today, but eager for any questions along both lines without a doubt. And as we wait on some additional folks, I have a couple of questions that I would love to lob people's way as we get started here, which will give me a really great idea of kind of what level we should be pegging our conversation at today. So if you wouldn't mind dropping into the chat, whether you are a 2030 veteran and have supported 10 submissions over the years since the program started in 2010, or if this is your very first year reporting, wherever you are in the spectrum, would be really delighted to know if you wouldn't mind dropping into the chat. And so glad to see so many first timers here and a vet or two. That is wonderful, wonderful to know. We've been so excited to welcome so many new 2030 commitment firms to the family here. Recently, we just hit 1,000 signatories a few weeks ago, which was an exciting milestone for us. So I know we'll probably have a lot of new faces with us as well, but appreciate you all dropping that in. And as you jot those down, I also would be really eager to understand kind of in your reporting period for this year, where you are in the process. Are you just cracking open the DDX for the first time since last March? Or are you well on your way combing through and doing quality control and adding project data and starting to kind of maybe encounter some questions and issues? So if you also wouldn't mind dropping that in the chat, would be great to know. Yeah, hi Dane, ready to hit submit, that's wonderful. And some folks who have already submitted, exciting. That's great to know. And knowing we have some folks who are a good bit through the process, does anyone have any questions that are top of mind? And if we didn't answer during this hour, you would be really bummed that we didn't cover? If there are any questions that you feel very strongly about, I'll make sure to pause a number of times, but do feel free to unmute or drop those in the chat as well, and I can make sure to keep them in mind as we go through. Edge tool, thanks, Brittany. What happens when you report a project with no LPD or EUI? Great question, great question. Still missing building codes. Alexis, on that one in particular, I would really love to follow up with you on what would be useful for you. So please do email any building codes that you would be interested in to 2030commitment@aia.org. Thanks for dropping those initial questions in. Really appreciate it. And please do at any point throughout the conversation today. And we will do our best to address them. And of course, we'll be sure to follow up with anyone who is not satiated, not satisfied with the level of depth we might be able to get into. But with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and walk through a number of the changes in the DDX for this year. Much of the DDX has been overhauled in recent history, which I'm sure many folks here know, being vets, but for those first timers, this might just be the only version of the tool you're familiar with. So bear with us as we talk through some of the changes between this year and years prior, just to catch folks up who are familiar with the old DDX. And as we get started, just a couple of kind of concepts to ground us in. You know, we are all here as we are 2030 commitment signatory firms, or perhaps some folks on the line, like myself included, who are helping you as best we can in your journey with the 2030 commitment. So want to kind of call attention to the journey of the program, and that when we started out of the gate in 2010, the 2030 commitment program had a target of 60% PEUI reduction, predicted energy use intensity reduction, which is escalating over time towards the overall goal of net zero carbon by 2030. And as you all are likely aware today, the program currently has an 80% PEUI, predicted energy use intensity reduction target. And as a 2030 commitment signatory, you know, we're all here working towards that, but we know that, of course, not every project might be hitting that target. But working towards that end goal. And this conversation today, we're mostly going to be focused on whole building projects, where PEUI is that key indicator and key metric that we're looking at. Of course, we definitely have loads of no shortage of interior only projects in the DDX, where predicted lighting power density, PLPD, is that key metric. But for the examples we'll walk through in the database, we're going to look at whole building projects in particular. So there's a 25% target there, but just to call that out as we jump on in. The DDX, as many of you know, is a cloud-based tool where all reported information is kept confidential and anonymous, is aggregated once a year by our team to release the 2030 by the numbers report, which kind of rolls up all of the information so we can assess the trends and how the program and the industry is doing as a whole, how we're making progress towards that 80% PEUI reduction target, as well as many of the optional fields that the DDX now offers, ranging from renewables to embodied carbon, as well, and we'll be sure to look through those. If you aren't already a DDX user, please do head to the DDX and create an account. Now is a really good time of the year where if your whole staff who needs access doesn't have access, a company administrator can help you do that. I mean, you can certainly go in as an administrator yourself if you do have those privileges to go ahead and invite employees and fellow colleagues into the program so they can all view and edit and add to your projects as well. Collaborators can also be added. We'll look at this as well in the DDX, which might be appropriate for you know, a consultant you're bringing in to do energy modeling, or a consultant that you're bringing in to you know, work on a specific development, but who isn't associated with your whole portfolio. So not only can you bring in folks who are on your team, who are fellow staff members of a given firm, but you can also bring in someone who might only be associated with one project where you don't want them to have full access to your portfolio as a whole. So a really great place for team members across the board to connect. One important item that we know always comes up and is a really important key question is, what projects should I be reporting into the DDX? So the answer can be a little tricky depending on the project you have at hand, but the general rules of thumbs apply. So if it's an active project, regardless of the design phase, whether it's in concept design, design development, construction administration, at any point in the phase, if the project is active, it should be reported for the reporting year we're in. And of course, we are in 2022 and report like taxes. So we are currently reporting any project that was worked on during 2021. And if I'm going to pause here just for a moment. I'm not sure if we have someone who might have a question and be on mute. Feel free to unmute yourself. If so, maybe just chatting, that's okay too. So we want to be reporting any project that's active, even if it was only active for one day in 2021. So when we go to report 2021 projects, if it was something you worked on and brought through design phases throughout the entire year and you're still working on, that's something you want to report, just like a project would be that you finished January 10th of 2021, you know, in the very first year of the calendar year, very first month of the calendar year. So anything that you touch during 2021, you want to count and kind of take credit for in your project, since you dedicated bandwidth and effort and had energy performance that can be associated with that time frame. A lot of firms will also go ahead and decide what a minimum threshold might be to report your project. So some firms will decide, if I am working on any project under 1,000 square feet, that might just not make sense for me to report and include in my reporting. That's something that you probably want to articulate in your sustainability action plan and have as kind of a universal threshold across your firm. So you're dealing with apples to apples information and don't have some studios and offices doing it one way and others doing it another way, but something to think through as you're combing through now during the reporting period and thinking about what projects you might be reporting for this year. And the second thing to keep in mind is really any project that has HVAC or lighting or building envelope modifications. So not only do we want active projects to be reported, but really anything that has the opportunity to impact energy performance. So those are kind of the three key elements that we're thinking about when we're thinking about what projects should be reported to the DDX. It's not just the projects that we're confident have really high performing, impressive building performance. We want to be reporting everything in your portfolio, not just the ones that might have sustainable design as a really core tenet of the mission of the building, to get a really accurate snapshot of not only what your firm is doing for your own purposes to be able to get a really clear, concise picture, but also so we could roll it up into that annual report that we have here. I'm going to pause here, and I think we might have a question or two. If you'd like to unmute yourself, please feel free.
Hi. Yes, I do have one question. I bet this happened to many firms. We had a lot of projects that got put on hold due to COVID, and we did not touch those projects at all in 2021. So you're saying that we should essentially not include those in 2021 reporting and maybe just put them on hold or cancel, doesn't matter?
Yeah, a great question. And we definitely know you are not alone here. So that would be a great example of a situation where you can mark the project on hold in the DDX. So we do have a setting kind of specifically designed for those instances where, funding might fall through and a client says, we want to put this on ice for a few months and come back to it, all the way to kind of a pandemic, long delay where you probably aren't just going to revisit it until folks come back to the office if you're working on a commercial office space, for instance.
Right.
So we'll be sure to look at that in the DDX. So you can definitely elect that setting and kind of continue your projects in the DDX, knowing you're not going to be adding any new design phase data since you kind of just had it on the back burner.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Absolutely. A great question. Okay, so looking at the reporting options, I know I have a couple questions about bulk import, and I'm sorry that there might be an issue that's cropping up for you, Jennifer, that your bulk upload that was submitted last year isn't coming through. Please do go ahead and email us at 2030commitment@aia.org, and we would be happy to investigate what might be going on. But again, really, definitely recommend folks checking out our bulk upload open office hour on our YouTube channel for 2030 commitment, and I'll be sure to drop the link as well. We'll be focusing on direct input today, which is the majority of firms that our 2030 commitment signatories use, but it's helpful even if you do submit via bulk upload to get a sense of the platform in the different fields. Two of the really important changes that are helpful to keep in mind as you go through reporting this year is the shift from reporting date to reporting year. We know this is a really tricky thing. We heard from feedback from you all that having one specific reporting date, the day, month of a year for a project was a really challenging, kind of cumbersome thing. So that's been shifted to reporting year only. So we've tried to simplify, and you're just going in and marking that any project data associated with 2021 exists, and that'll be carried forward and submitted into your portfolio for this reporting season. So it's a simpler process this year, but the trade-off of having that reporting year structure now is we have to make sure that some 2021 data exists and is associated with the project. We can't submit a project for 2021 if the most recent data is for 2020. But there's a really easy way of duplicating that information and just carrying that forward. For example, if you might have a project that's been on hold with COVID, or maybe you've been kind of working on it, it's not totally on the back burner, but there's really no new energy modeling or new parameters that have been introduced. So something that we definitely want to call attention to up front and center. We've also simplified project types. So now instead of non-residential, residential, we have whole building as an option for reporting. And whole building and interior only are really the two pathways that when going into the DDX, you'll select one or the other, which will inform a lot of the other fields, and whether you're using PEUI or PLPD is your key metric. We also have a few new renewable energy options which we're excited to offer. Really helpful for folks to give feedback on what would be useful to you all. So we're excited to add heat pump, geothermal, micro hydroelectric, and biomass to the current suite of 4 original renewable energy options that we have, including wind turbines, solar photovoltaic, solar thermal. So a broader suite of options to select from there. And in addition, a couple new fields related to energy modeling and embodied carbon modeling fields. Some new energy modeling tool options that you can select as where you crunch those numbers when adding a PEUI, as well as the option to add energy modeling date or embodied carbon modeling dates. And this was really helpful to understand from you all as users. That would be helpful to you. So not related to the reporting year. So we're going to submit data for 2021. This is really intended to help you understand, you know, if you're doing 5, 6 models, for example, throughout the course of a project's lifespan, having the ability to add specific dates for energy modeling, we know would be helpful to you all to keep track of when you did a given energy model or an embodied carbon model. So something that's now available to you in the platform. And speaking of energy codes, it sounds like we have some folks who would be interested in adding some new ones here. Please do always feel free to recommend ones that would be useful to you. And we do our best to update those iteratively. We have added for this reporting season IECC 2021, as well as these 4 ASHRAE, New York and California energy codes as well. A full list of code equivalents is available on our DDX help pages as well. And with that, I'm going to jump on into the platform itself and walk through the process. If there are no additional questions at this time, I know a lot of the ones that folks have added to the chat. Thank you for those. I'll be sure to cover as I walk through the platform, but feel free as I stop sharing my screen and switch over to unmute yourself or drop any additional ones in if you have any. Just take me one moment. Okay. So this is probably something that looks familiar to folks who have joined us for previous open office hours or perhaps for a 2030 support appointment. This is our DDX page for Leslie Nope, our test user here associated with Acme Architects, our kind of test dummy account. So this is what I'll be using for the purposes of walking through the process with everyone here today. We're going to go through things a little bit fast. If you are confused about anything, would like to go through anything one-on-one, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at 2030commitment@aia.org or set up a bookings appointment with us. You can also email us to do that, and we would be delighted to walk you through this one-on-one. But this is the page that the system drops you in on once you log into your DDX account. On the left-hand side, you'll see your top performing projects, which can be a helpful way of just checking in on where some projects are. You can filter these by interior only, whole building, new construction, whether they're active or, for instance, on hold, any one of the project status settings we have. This is also where you can go to change your password, your contact info, or if you move on to another firm, associate yourself with a different company. Then scrolling down a little bit further, we have all of the projects that you're associated with. So this won't be all of your firm's projects. This will be either projects that you've created or that you've been added to as a collaborator. So this is something that, if you don't see a project that you're working on, definitely reach out to your administrative point of contact and they can add you to it. You can also request to be added from the company page that we'll look at in just a moment. And here we have kind of the list of all that I'm associated with within this test account. You can adjust how many you see, pan through, and you can also search by a few different ways. So I tend to search by name or by number. We know that every project has a unique number associated with that. The DDX will give you one by default if you don't override it, but a lot of folks choose to do so and use an accounting code, or if you have an internal database where you have a specific numeric system, it's also often very helpful to align it with that. But you can also search by a number of fields like city, state, postal code, or climate zone. So that is kind of what you'll see on your project page. You probably had the chance to poke around a good bit there. Same with your company page. So this is kind of all of the macro level information associated with your 2030 commitment signatory firm information. So your sustainability action plan, for those who are reporting for your very first time, perhaps you haven't quite finished your sustainability action plan yet if you're less than a year into the program. But once you do submit it, this is where it'll appear. So it's accessible to everyone who's adding information and viewing information in the DDX. It'll also have your commitment letter, your custom signatory target if it's not the default 80% target. Some firms choose to have something that's a little less aggressive. Some firms, choose to ramp it up to that full 20, 30, 100% target, from the get-go. Of course, it's flexible to you, but where that's located as well. And in addition, one thing that's very helpful to just keep in mind is that the admin POC for your firm, every firm has one. Maybe it's you, maybe it's someone you work with. And their information there. Since admins have different privileges than all kind of general employees, that can be helpful to keep in mind in case you need to have, be added to a project or, have any issues. But I'll pause here, seeing a hand raised. What questions?
Yes. Does this company-wide target number changes anything in the project page? For example, is it still going to show me only 80% reduction for current year, for example, or is it going to change the number and reductions per this company-wide target that I put in the page?
A great question. So by default, the DDX, when you go to start a project, it'll help you figure out the baseline and the target based on that 80% default, but you can override it with your custom company target if your firm has something that's not 80%, if it's higher or lower. And we'll look at that in just a moment, and I'll be sure to point out where you can make that adjustment if that adjustment works for you. So that's an opportunity to change, a given project to align with your custom firm target, or if your target, let's say in general, is 80%, but you have a specific client asking for a net zero carbon building, or for a specific project, maybe it's a really challenging use type and 80% is going to be really tough to do, it's not in the cards, maybe you can adjust that target and have it be lower for that specific project. Great question. Down below here, just calling out for folks who are bulk uploaders, bulk importers, this is where you can go to import that information and upload the bulk upload spreadsheet when you're ready to do so. This is where you find it on the company page. Administrators are able to do that. Same with the admin POC contact. So I'm kind of in this Leslie Nope test administrator account. This would not appear for an employee. So we don't have folks in bigger firms kind of going ahead and adding that information until it's gone through that quality control, quality assurance process, but is there just so you know where it's located. Here we have all of the projects associated with a given company. And not only can you kind of choose the display for what you're seeing by kind of the labels that are here, which you can see, but you can also alter them. So for instance, this might be really helpful to do so you can see the last phase reported. Adding fields like this might help you understand, which projects I need to flip to complete, that are done. Or which projects are at a stage where, for example, if your firm has a policy where you do energy modeling at X and Y phase of the design process, understand which you might need to intervene with and pay a bit more attention to. And you can also filter by reporting year, the portfolio years that it might already be included in. Let's say it's a project that's been on the table for a couple of years and has already been submitted a couple of times. This can be really helpful during the reporting period as a starting point. So you can, figure out the list of projects that you need to work through and update. So we're in our 2021 reporting period now. I might want to select 2020 to see which projects I need to carry forward and ensure they have that active 2021 information included so we can make sure it's submitted into our portfolio. So for example, 27 Cardinal Drive, this project here, was last reported in 2020. If I want to bring it forward into 2021, I'm going to go into the project page and down to the design phase data. And we'll go through this in a little more detail in terms of kind of how this page is structured. But I'm going to go into the little 3-dot icon here and select duplicate for another year. So the most recent design phase data that I've inputted, I'm going to click duplicate. I'm going to move it forward to design development, or maybe it's gone all the way into construction documents or administration. You can select whichever makes sense, and say I would like to duplicate it for 2021. And if no information has changed, if you've not done more energy modeling, in schematic design, that was the last time you adjusted anything with the PEUI, that's all you need to do. And then this project can be submitted as part of your 2021 portfolio. You can, however, go in and once you've duplicated it, make any adjustments you need. So let's say you've pushed down the PEUI from 1210 just to 10. You can go ahead and make that adjustment, no new additional fields, and the project will be set and ready to go. So that might make sense for some of those projects that have been on hold that you might still want to include in your submission, even though you've not done any design work on them. If you'd like to keep carrying them through, expecting that in a year or so it'll be picked back up and worked on. So that's a really easy way of going ahead and doing it. But for now, let's start with adding a project, and we'll walk through some of that in more detail in just a moment. So when going to add a project, this is the first step of the process that you'll come up on. We're going to say that it's my dream home that we're working on. That's the project name. It's active. It's not on hold, which, certainly if you had a project that started this year, so it's not already in the DDX, but for whatever reason, due to the pandemic, otherwise it's now on hold, you can start a project directly from the status just to keep it on ice and account for it, not lose track of it. But no, it's not, knowing it's not something you're actively working on. There's also the options to select complete. If a project moved really quick through the process within a calendar year, or canceled. So something like on hold would be it's on ice. We think it's going to be picked back up. Canceled is like, this project's not coming back for whatever reason, which is something that we heard from users would be helpful to be able to include to demonstrate the work and the progress that you've done for the project, even if it didn't come to fruition. Here is the default project number that the DDX will provide you. Every project has to have a unique number within your firm, within the universe that you are in with your firm. But we can certainly override this. So I could, put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If that aligns with my accounting code or whatever system I needed to use to align with my internal database. I can select interior only or whole building, which is one of these decisions that kind of is set in stone once you move forward from here. Since PLPD is the main metric for interior only projects and PEUI for whole building projects. You can also select new construction or major renovation. Let's say it's new construction here. And you'll also associate it with a specific office or studio that you have. Here, our kind of test firm has a number of them. Your firm might only have one, but select whichever is most appropriate. We also have now moved the United States up in the list of projects, so you no longer have to scroll through for several scrolls worth to find us. But you'll go ahead and select that and fill out the postal code and the city. We're just going to say where I am. We're in Washington, D.C. here with AIA National, so I'll jot that down. And when you do input that postal code, it automatically populates a climate zone. But you can override this. So if I know that I'm in a microclimate and that 3C would be more appropriate than 4A or what have you, I can go ahead and change that. If you know for whatever reason that you have a microclimate going on or have another reason you might need to change that. One thing that I do want to point out is that for the firms that are having international projects that they're designing, the climate zone will not automatically populate. So that's something that we provide a table for on the DDX help pages to help you figure out what the most appropriate climate zone is. But it's something that is really good to consult to figure out kind of what the most logical choice will be, but unfortunately it doesn't pre-populate for you. The last kind of item here on this basic project setup will be selecting your units. So for one of those international projects, SI might make the most sense. We'll go with Imperial for now. And then we will, oh man, okay, so I guess a good example of why we need a unique project number. Looks like I was doing this in the last tutorial I had given. Surprise, surprise. So I'll change that project number and move on through. And sometimes we get the question of whether, we need to create some really funky system to ensure that no other DDX firm has similar project numbers. Doesn't matter what any other firm is doing, we just need to make sure it's unique within your firm to maybe get ahead of any questions there. We now have step 2 of setting up a project here. So we are going to input the estimated occupancy year. We'll say it's 2024. And we'll also input the energy code. So this is especially important for projects that, it's needed for all projects, but it's especially important for those projects that might not be doing energy modeling. Of course, we strongly suggest doing energy modeling is everyone knows early and often is best and can yield the best results to help inform your design decision making, but we know that it is not possible on all projects. Lots of projects in the DDX do not have energy modeling information associated with them, whether just at the stage they're at in this process or at all. And for those instances, we'll help you estimate a baseline and target, of course, as well as the reduced, the estimated savings of how your PEUI is being reduced with the assumption you're building to code. So especially important to keep that in mind for those projects where you might not be doing energy modeling and you need to lean on that estimated percent reduction. These are all optional fields. The amount of occupants, costs, sometimes that can be helpful for you to track in here, especially for smaller firms that might be using the DDX exclusively as their one real hub to track energy performance data. For those who have their own internal systems, maybe that's elsewhere and might not be as important to you to create. But we'll go ahead down here to the next step, adding our use types. So here you're going to click the plus sign and then select whichever use type makes the most sense for your project. You can have, unlimited, maybe unlimited is a strong word, but as many use types as you need if your project has multiple. And there's a lot of really great questions that folks typically have about what this looks like for bigger developments, for master plans, or for, let's just scroll down to residential for our example here. Let's say we aren't just building my dream home, we're building a development of 10 dream homes for folks. So if I was just building, adding this project for one single building, I might add 1,000 square feet. It's a smaller place. And the baseline and the target derived from Zero Tool will be populated for you. So to your question about whether the default company target is populated here, it's not. This is the 80% default target, which you can then override just below here. So we know, on the next page where we define the target, for the residential single family detached use type, we can go ahead and either add 10 entries if you wanted to reflect 10 different single family detached projects all associated with together on the same footprint like that. And it'll continue adding the square footage, or I can simply multiply the use type square footage information. So if I have 10 1,000 square foot homes, I can simply input 10,000 square feet and treat it as one project, whichever is easiest for you. But here is where you'll go in to override the baseline before we shift to the target. So this is important for international projects. The default baselines are set up based on REX 2001 and CVEX 2003 in Zero Tool. So this is for the US and North America. So if you have one of those international projects, Edge Tool is what we recommend using to establish what the best baseline is for you. We know that CVEX 2003 can often not be a really accurate estimate for a baseline for an international project. So you can certainly use it, but we definitely recommend using Edge Tool if at all available to you. But let's just say we're happy with this baseline for our residential home. We'll move forward. But before I do that, I think I see a hand raised. So please feel free to go ahead and ask a question if anything is top of mind for you.
Yeah, so how does the DDX platform calculate square footage? Is it like area under the roof? Is it conditioned space? Is it gross floor area?
Yeah, great question. So the default for the program is gross square footage. Certain signatory firms do decide that, for instance, if you're a developer and you use net, instead of gross square footage, we do have some firms that kind of make the decision that across the board, they're going to opt for something other than gross square footage, like conditioned space or like net square footage, if it kind of aligns with all of the other data tracking and analysis that they do. So we do see instances where people kind of deviate from that default. The program as a whole is generally based on gross square footage, but we do see people who, opt for a different framework if it aligns with their internal processes better. But gross square footage, we know, tends to be the logical default and also tends to be the format where different state reporting requirements are kind of earmarked to. But something that, one would want to articulate in their sustainability action plan and kind of decide on as a firm, so everything is apples to apples and each project doesn't kind of, treat square footage differently, if that makes sense. And I see a question about edge tool costs. I am not familiar, and perhaps if anyone here uses edge tool and can speak to that, feel free to toss any thoughts into the chat there. But I am unfortunately not versed on that. One of the other examples that comes to mind while we're kind of thinking about baselines here, however, and square footage, is there are a couple use types that may make sense for you to explore a different baseline for and a custom baseline. Dennis, I know you had shot a note over there about large scale data centers or labs. Labs 21 is a really great tool to use for that use type, which might make sense as well. So for those that are kind of on the edge there, it might make sense to kind of consult some additional sources and kind of confirm or deny whether the baseline that Zero Tool provides is a logical fit for you. Another hand there, if anyone has another question.
I do for the graph that you will just go in below.
Sure.
Yeah, I will wait.
Yep.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries. And please raise your hand back on and just feel free to unmute if I don't answer your question.
Will do.
Thanks. And so here is exactly where we were talking about setting that custom target. So the default setting is 80% here, even though my company setting is 55. So if I wanted to override it, I can just go ahead and plug in the predicted energy use number that I want to hit for this project, whether it's a little less aggressive at 55, or if I want to really lean in and shoot for 100% net zero carbon, you can go ahead and enter it there. I'm going to leave it as the default here for now. However, but for this chart here we have on the bottom, this can be a really helpful tool to think through what your target should be, whether you should kind of refine it and make it more aggressive or less aggressive than the default baseline. It's a box and whisker plot here where a couple of the bars that are shown by default code equivalency based on that code you selected, your custom company target. So you can see kind of relative to the company's decision for a specific target, kind of how this use type and climate zone tends to shake out for projects, as well as the 2030 target. And you can refine this. So let's say that maybe I wasn't building a single family detached home. Maybe I was building multifamily 2 to 4 units, but I don't really just want to see that. Maybe I want to widen the scope and look at 5 or more units as well, even though my project has 3. I might want to just go in and select both so you could kind of compare and contrast. I might also want to go in and instead of looking at just the climate zones, I'm going to reduce this back down just for now for us and go back to single family detached. But for climate zones, we know that this project is in 4A. So I might go ahead and select that. When you hover over the box and whisker plot, it'll show you the sample size as well as the low, median, high, and quartile kind of results there. So we know that a median PEUI for this project in terms of percent reduction is 46. So we know that, on average, firms are getting very close to our company target of 55%. But it's certainly possible that some projects that have been submitted to the DDX have not only outperformed the 80% target, but have beat net zero carbon going beyond 100 and all the way to 120. So, generating more energy than they're using on their footprint. But, maybe I don't want to just look at 4A. Maybe I would like to look at all the 4B and C climate zones and kind of increase that sample size to 318 to see if that makes a difference. So it's a really helpful tool to play around with and get a sense of what's been done and what's possible, where you fall in the pack for a given project to help inform that target. Did that answer your question?
I think so. I have one question. Still, I have some projects, and this may be an error on my end, but these projects, they do not have energy model, and therefore the 2030 DDX takes the code minimum approach kind of as a baseline, not as a baseline, but as the essentially we designed it to be code minimum. So that's fine. It's a good assumption to stay consistent, I guess. But some of those projects where you see the code equivalency 52%, this 52% number doesn't match the percentage reduction shown on the main project. Is it an error that may be happening in the, because in ideal world, code equivalency percentage reduction should match this number, NA number currently should here.
Yeah,
maybe it's an error, but that's the logic, correct? If you don't have an energy model, there's no way to enter specific KBTU numbers. Therefore, you are kind of assumed to be code minimum.
Yes. So exactly. So let me walk through an example of that, and there very well could be a bug going on, but let's see if this sheds any light. And if it looks like it still might be not making sense, definitely feel free to send a screenshot along and we can investigate. Either way, we can take a look at it and just
will do. Thank you.
You bet. So for instance, for this project, I clicked through the project page, I finished setting it up. And we have here kind of that average of what similar projects in the DDX has achieved for percent EUI reduction. We have the firm average. So our firm, maybe we're kind of early on in our sustainability 2030 commitment journey. On average, we have that level of reduction. I'm going to go down all the way to design phase data. And this is where you go to add data and information. Some firms decide they're going to do this at every phase of the project, at concept through construction administration. Other firms decide that I'm just going to go in every March or every reporting period and add the data for whatever phase I'm at that time. Whichever approach works best for you, certainly is a good way to do it. So let's say that we're just in concept. We want to make sure that we're selecting the right reporting year. So I want to add this information for 2021 so I could include it in my 2021 submission. We need to make sure that there's at least, kind of one piece of data for the reporting year. And if I haven't done energy modeling, I'm going to click no, the default setting, predicted energy use. Has energy modeling been done for this design phase? No. If you did have energy modeling completed, you would enter this information of the date you modeled, what tool you used, whether you did it in-house or out of house. And you can also add fuel sources if you have renewables that you're incorporating, or other a sense of, whether they're on or off site. So like, let's say I know that I have solar panels on my project that will be contributing 100,000 kilowatt hours to the project each year. And then I know that, based on its energy demand, that the rest of it is going to come from grid electricity. So, that might represent 800,000 kilowatt hours. So you can derive your PEUI that way. If you don't have that, that fuel source level information, but you've done energy modeling, you can go ahead and add it here. So, I might have done modeling and gotten a result of 30, a predicted EUI of 30. But again, per that example, maybe we've done no energy modeling. So maybe we have no information to report here. We're going to rely on that estimate based on code. Just to go down through these other options, which you can select and elect to fill out. If you have on-site or off-site renewables, you can select these options, whichever are appropriate, whether they're on or off-site, whether they have additionality or are located within the same grid. But let's say we don't have any of that. You can also add predicted lighting power density, even if it's a whole building project. This will kind of be the key metric for those interior only projects. But here for whole building, let's say we don't have that either. We've not done any embodied carbon modeling, but you could add it if you had here. You can add the kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent over meters squared, the date, the tool, the time frame, the scope of that LCA analysis. But again, let's just say this is a really basic project. Maybe we're going to do energy modeling down the line. Maybe we're not. Maybe that's just not in the cards for this project. So we've not selected anything here except the phase and the reporting year. We're going to go ahead and save it. And it's going to give you an estimated savings from baseline. So until you add that design phase data, it won't give you any estimate based on code. Since it doesn't really know yet if you're going to go that route or you're going to add energy modeling data. Because it's an estimate based off code, it's not really going to give you we can't really give a predicted EUI number for that, but we can give you an estimated savings relative to the baseline. And of course, here on the bottom, we also have the baseline and target displayed as well to kind of give that frame of reference. So I hope that is a little bit helpful, but certainly if it's showing a different number, would love to take a look at it with you and see what might be going on. As you add design phase data, we'll have additional dots populated over the course of a project life. So you can see the trend line of the predicted energy use intensity, hopefully going down iteratively as you move through. I want to stop here and also just show a couple additional fields that are helpful to take a look at. So one is how to add a collaborator. So if you have someone else in your firm or another firm who you are working with, here is where you go to add their email to invite them to the project. So I might go ahead and want to be inviting Charlotte Dreisen, who I work with, myself. You can select either read only or the ability to edit. So it's helpful to know that you can invite people who are within your firm as well as folks outside of your firm who are in the DDX working for another firm. Maybe you're in the associate firm and there's an AOR, or maybe there's a third party consultant you're bringing in to support a specific project. That's where you want to go to add that information. And so with that in mind, that's the process for adding project information through direct input. I'm going to go ahead and move on to a couple other areas of the DDX. And make sure to reserve a good chunk of the 13 or so minutes we have left for questions. The third tab that you have on your DDX page is submitting a portfolio. It's a really straightforward process. Of course, all the hard work that goes into this of populating a project and adding design phase data is, can be a little time consuming if you're collecting it from a lot of colleagues. But here, once you're ready to submit, is really very quick and easy. You first select your reporting year. So, we're in the 2021 reporting process. And if, like me, you've already submitted a portfolio for this year, you're going to get a little notification reminding you that you've done that, just for your awareness. You can go ahead and add additional portfolio submissions at any time up to the March 31st deadline. So you might do this for a couple of reasons. We don't yet have a kind of draft submission, preview submission feature. But once you do submit a portfolio, a reports tab populates for your firm. So you have some insights here about the percent predicted EUI reduction, the same for LPD, the number of the percent of gross square footage of projects that have been energy modeled, some really helpful analytics. This populates once you submit your portfolio. So let's say March 2nd, you still have some time before the March 31st reporting deadline. You have almost all of your projects together and you're eager to get a sense for what they look like in that reports tab. You can go ahead and submit it, take a look, get a sense of where you are right now, and then do some additional quality control. Maybe you have, one project team who you've been bugging to get you some information. They haven't gotten it for you yet. You can go ahead and resubmit your portfolio when you have 100% of it, in a week or two ahead of the March 31st deadline. There's no problem with that whatsoever. You might also resubmit a portfolio if you were a really early bird. Let's say, I know we have a couple on the call that submitted their portfolio already. We had some folks in January who are right out of the gate ready to click submit. But maybe you realize that a project team had done an energy model a few months back and you didn't realize, so you want to go in and update that PEUI number. You can go ahead and resubmit to make sure to capture that up-to-date number for all of the last of the 2021 work. But we'll go ahead and just select 2021. We're getting that notification because I already submitted a portfolio. I'm resubmitting now. And it brings you to this page here where it has a list of all of the projects that have data for 2021. So anything that you haven't gone in and either duplicated 2020 data or added fresh 2021 information to won't be populated here. That's why it's so important to ensure that we have some form of 2021 data included. And by default, all of the projects are checked yes, that we do want to submit them and include them with my portfolio. But we know that some firms have test projects like the one we made today. So maybe you have a couple projects in here that you've used to teach your peers and your team about how the DDX works and want to uncheck that. So we might go ahead and do that for our submission today. There's two really important items on the bottom here that I want to make sure to cover as well. One is confirming that this snapshot reflects my company's full design portfolio for 2021, kind of how you define that in your sustainability action plan. We'll go ahead and check that. This is the same kind of confirmation that existed in the old DDX. And then the second box is that you give consent to have AIA publish or share your company's predicted energy use reduction publicly. Totally optional. It is 100% optional. The only instances where we do this, where we might showcase a company predicted energy use reduction or a project information, would only ever be in an article or a newsletter where we're talking about the success of the program and the success of some projects that have been reported in the previous year. And we would only ever do that with your explicit approval and working with you to include that information in a given article or interview if you were involved with that work. So it's absolutely optional. And if you did check yes, nothing would be used without your prior consent and specific consent for kind of the specific place where that might be used. So just want to kind of make sure to address that specifically. We take your data privacy very seriously, but that's what that box is talking about. Since every once in a while during our quarterly newsletters, we reach out to firms to include them and celebrate the success they're having in driving down their predicted energy use intensity and reaching the net zero carbon goals they're setting out for themselves. A lot of firms asked for this option to kind of elect that they would potentially be open to it or not open to it. That's why it's there. So let's just say we do feel comfortable with that, with the possibility of it. I might check that here. And then all I do is click continue. And I've gone ahead and submitted my portfolio. So here on the right-hand side, we have a badge, depending on how long you've been a 2030 commitment signatory firm. We also have a survey link here. Definitely encourage you, if you've been the admin POC for your firm who's been going through and herding cats and has been able to use the DDX and get a real sense for it, and you have recommendations on how we can improve, we absolutely are always all ears and are thrilled to better understand what we can do better, what new functionality might be of interest to you. Maybe if you encounter a bug or something that's not working like you expect it to, we always would love to know that information. You can email that to us at any time, of course, but you can also submit the survey if now is a good time once you've submitted your portfolio to kind of sit down for a minute and reflect. And you can also download your portfolio as well. This is some information that is also stored in your company page. So I'm going to scroll down. We have those offices and studios here. We have our employees below. And we have the 2030 commitment resources that we make available, like the Welcome Kit and Sustainability Action Plan, as well as company resources. So this is where all of your portfolio submissions are housed. So if you are one of those firms who might submit a portfolio, 2, 3, 4 times between December and March when you're refining and doing quality control, all of those submissions are stored here for your reference, but you can also go ahead and download it directly from the reports page. I know that was a lot. So I'm going to pause here. I know we have some questions in the chat, so I'm gonna crack this open and take a look. Let's see. Glad that being able to submit and resubmit is helpful. Let's start with one question about project target EUI. When looking back at the whole portfolio, does the project target EUI change to the current 80%, or will it show how my project did for the target percentage under which it was submitted? I'm trying to think of, does the project target EUI change? I'm not sure, Shauna, that I'm entirely following the question. If you do want to unmute yourself, yeah, I would be delighted to better understand. And I'm not sure if I'm just...
For sure. I was just wondering, so we have projects in there since 2010, right? So, and somebody has gone in and updated the target UI to a unique one. And so I'm wondering if I change it back to like being what it was in 2010, will I be able to see that, or will it update it to like 80% instead of like the 60% that it should have been?
For a specific project?
For all the projects. I want to see what we did toward like that year's target, if we made it or not.
Got it. I see. This is a good question. So the DDX has changed a lot over time, and it is possible that changing your company target shouldn't affect. So in the current DDX, if you change your company target, let's say right now Acme View Architects has a target of 55%. If next year we decide we want to ramp that up to an 80% target, that will not change the targets, the custom targets that I've input into specific projects. In the old DDX and data dating that far back to 2010, my impression is that is still the case, that any changing of a company level target wouldn't impact whichever specific targets existed for that project, and whether they were being met or not should be maintained. But I would have to maybe consult our developers to get a sense of how those old kind of data structures worked. But it's a great question. I can follow up there. Let's see. A question about submitting and resubmitting in real time, so we can see how we're doing as we log projects rather than waiting until the end to submit the full portfolio. So you certainly can do this if you have project teams, who are coming together. Let's say we have a lot of firms who come together every quarter and, every few months sit down and add all of the relevant project data and energy modeling that they've done. You can go ahead and certainly add all of that information. I don't know if you'd be able to submit your portfolio outside of the submission period, though, from December 31st to March 31st. But if it's within that time frame, you can absolutely submit and then resubmit to kind of see how you're doing as you're doing that data collection and input process. But we're actively working on expanding the reports tab, and know that there's a lot of requests for, I know a lot of folks who have used the DDX in years prior are familiar with a scatter plot that used to exist in an old iteration of the tool. And we're actively working on thinking through how we can bring back some of that functionality to compare projects that you have within your firm, as well as kind of to that anonymous universe that's been submitted in through the DDX. And as well as the reports tab phase to kind of better expand and provide deeper insights for the projects that you've submitted for a given reporting year, which you can not only filter by year, but by office location as well. So for instance, if I want to go in and take a look at the work that our DC office is doing, thank you, Matt, for jumping in to clarify. I joined the team here just before this reporting period, so I have a little bit of difficulty in kind of the non-reporting period cadence, but thank you, Matt, for clarifying that you can submit at any time, not just during the reporting period. We may just not have added that following reporting period year until the previous one closes. So for example, we're in the 2021 reporting period now until March 31st, so you won't be able to submit for 2022 until that closes. Thanks for jumping in there. And another question about projects being kind of marked, being submitted after marked complete. No, so once you have a project, let's say that you had a project that was in construction documents and construction administration in 2021, and it's been completed, it got completed, finished in October, absolutely go ahead and include that and submit it with your 2021 portfolio, absolutely, as long as it was active at any point in 2021. So for a project that was worked on and completed in 2020, it's been marked as complete. We want to leave that in the 2020 reporting period, not bring it forward into the current one. But certainly more than fine to include that in your current submission for any year that it was worked on and then marked complete for. And I know we're at 3 o'clock now, and that we have some questions that we weren't able to address. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us at 2030commitment@aia.org with any specific questions, comments, feedback that you might have. We would be thrilled to talk through any questions, help you walk through the DDX one-on-one and set up some time with us or one of my colleagues on the 2030 commitment team. So don't hesitate to do so. If you have any remaining questions, or if you realize that you have any questions as we get close to the March 31st reporting deadline, again, don't hesitate to reach out, 2030commitment@aia.org. I'm sure I've said that 20 times so far in this past hour. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this open office hour session on submitting your portfolio. Really appreciate your time and thoughtful questions and great insights and feedback here. And we will talk to everyone soon, I'm sure, if not on an open office hour session soon over email. Our last remaining open office hour session for the year is March 21st, 2 to 3 p.m., the same time slot. And please do feel free to put it on your calendar in case you end up having any questions. That'll be a great opportunity to talk through them live and get feedback from staff as well as other folks on the call who are working through the same challenges. Thanks again, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.